Welcome to the Options Save Lives weekly live stream, where we spend an hour each week exploring life-improving topics through a lens of alcohol recovery and the Sinclair Method. Every week, we take on a new question, topic, or common challenge to empower people to either build a better relationship with alcohol or to eliminate it completely. Episodes are filmed live on Twitch at twitch.tv/C3 Foundation, and the audience is encouraged to ask questions and engage with the host and guests. The Options Save Lives weekly stream is hosted by Executive Director Jenny Williamson and is produced by the C3 Foundation with the support of R Street Institute and other generous sponsors. For more information about the C3 Foundation or the Sinclair Method, visit our website at c3foundation.org. Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Options Save Lives weekly live stream. As always, I am Jenny Williamson, Executive Director at the C3 Foundation and your host for the next hour. How is everybody out there in the audience today? Thanks for being with us. We are broadcasting live from the C3 Foundation office here in Fort Myers, Florida. And we'd love to know where you're watching us from. And any first-timers to the stream, if you're out there, make sure you drop in and say hi. Welcome. We're glad that you showed up for this talk. So this week, we're going to talk about the Sinclair Method support process with Bruce Rose of Alcohol Recovery Scotland. Now, we spend a lot of time on our show talking about support for the person using the Sinclair Method and support for loved ones. And that's because it is so important for success. Over the years, we've seen that those people who don't have support, they struggle. And while they can still be successful, it generally takes them so much longer to reach their reduction goals. So we're thrilled to have Bruce with us today to talk more about he helps clients build supportive environments that enable them to achieve lasting success with the Sinclair Method. If you have questions while we're talking or suggestions that have helped you personally, please put those in the chat box. We'd like to keep things interactive. And before we jump right in, let me properly introduce Bruce Rose for those who may not know him. So Bruce has a number of years' experience working with individuals in drug and alcohol dependency through his roles working for a homeless charity night shelter and as both a deputy manager and manager of drug and alcohol residential rehabilitation centers. His background and training was originally abstinence-based models. Bruce began researching other models of recovery and found Claudia Christian's TEDx talk on YouTube. He initially switched it off with the comment, "What a load of rubbish." And I'm not even going to try to fake a Scottish accent on that to make it more authentic. But following further research, he came to realize that the Sinclair Method worked, just as Claudia had said. Bruce now works with clients exclusively with the Sinclair Method and has a passion to share his experience and learned knowledge on the Sinclair Method to date. His goal is to see TSM readily available to anyone in Scotland. On a personal note, Bruce's passion to work in addiction comes from 6 years' lived experience of addiction in his early 20s and the loss of his own father to alcohol addiction. So everybody, go ahead and welcome Bruce to our stream. You guys are awesome. We've got some Bruce. We've got some people from all the way from the UK to California today. So you have a worldwide audience.
Good afternoon, good evening, good wherever you are in the world. Thank you, Jenny. I always love the American introductions. You always do it very professionally in America. It's always the same in America. They always give people this huge big introduction, and then you always think, I hope I can actually live up to half of it.
Well, before we begin, we usually like to start with a little icebreaker. So I don't know, are you watching the Olympics at all?
I've seen one morning of it. It's in the morning time here, so I'm busy working, but I've seen about half an hour to an hour of it. Speed skating or so.
All right. right. So our icebreaker today, what is your favorite Winter Olympic sport?
Unicycling.
I don't know. Is that a Winter Olympic sport?
It is in Scotland. Winter Olympics. It would have to be the speed skating. I loved, or the long, or the I call it long jump, the ski jump. Ski jump.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I like the snowboarding and the ski jump type events and the slaloms
Yeah.
and all of that. Yeah, and unlike you, here it's not in the morning. Here the Olympics are showing right about the time I'm trying to go to bed at night. So I probably get maybe about a half hour in before I'm like, I want to watch, but I got to go to bed. So, but why
It's where a video comes in handy.
Yeah. And someone said, well, being Scottish, maybe you would be well up on curling.
Curling, yeah, curling is a big sport here, and well, apart from the Canadians and somebody else, the Americans, Scottish are normally pretty high up in the ranks of that. It just needs to be a bit faster. I'm into a bit faster sports and a bit, but yeah, it's good. It's good for.
So why don't you start off by giving a little bit more about your background and why because I proposed several topics, and the first one you jumped in on was the support process. So why don't you give some background and why the topic is so important to you and the work that you're doing with people?
Yeah, I like you were saying, my background was alcohol and drug rehab management. Based in abstinent-based programs, and the thing where the abstinent-based programs or the peer support groups are so good at is the support structure. They're very, very good at that side of things. They just don't deal with AUD or alcohol dependency as a neurological or a medical condition. So when I transferred. You're right. Not every time I speak to Claudia, but quite often when I speak to Claudia now, the first thing I do is apologize, because when I saw the video, I was so used to abstinent-based programs. I switched it off halfway through, and I just thought, what an absolute load of rubbish. I have never heard anything like it. And I actually got really angry, I have to say, because I was thinking, this is just not right, because it's, again, you guys know it better than I do, is that we're dealing with people's lives here. And I'm thinking, hang on a minute, they're promoting a 78% success rate, and they're saying, if you take this pill alongside some support, blah, 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 blah. And I'm thinking, it's just, that can't happen. But I did a bit more research into it. And the more I looked into it, the more sense it made. Then I started working with clients, and it was just, I was just watching client after client after client coming through the whole process. And what I did was, I understood from the rehab work that I did, the support side of things was really important. And I wasn't sure if it was, I thought initially, like a lot of people do, that TSM was just a case of taking the naltrexone, taking the medication, and hey presto, 3 months later, everything's fine. Now, for some people it does. So I don't knock that. But then he doesn't like me to mention it publicly, but I work with an addiction specialist doctor here in Scotland who is very well in tune with naltrexone as well. He understands naltrexone, he understands TSM, and he did do before I got involved with him. But when I first started working with him, he said to me, you are aware that there is only a 40-50% success rate. And I had heard and read in the Cure for Alcoholism and what you guys, C3 Foundation, were doing, 78%. And I'm thinking, something's wrong here. It just doesn't add up. Long story short, 6 months later, the doctor that I worked with, he emailed me and he said, I have never written so many, we call them repeat prescriptions in this country, but refills or whatever you'd call them in the States. He said, normally a client would come to me, I would write them a prescription for naltrexone. A month later, I would write them another one, and then that's probably the last I'd see of them in most cases. And then all of a sudden, long story short, we realized that because I was working with them, on a day-to-day basis or a week-to-week basis, alongside his medical expertise and his medical support and the naltrexone, the two of them married together, the success rate did go right the way up to 70 to 80%.
Yeah. Also, if somebody is stopping after 2 months, they haven't really completed the extinction process yet anyway. So
Yeah.
of course it'd be a much lower success rate because, I mean, what we know now about the Sinclair method is that, once you do it, if you're going to continue drinking, it is for life. It's a lifestyle change. And I like to try to frame that as a lifestyle change, a health change, as opposed to somebody you're going to be in recovery for the rest of your life, needing treatment. Ugh, and it becomes this scary, overwhelming thing. And even having support that can kind of remind people of that this is a full lifestyle change to make your life better and to make you healthier. So go ahead and continue talking a bit about how that process of seeing the success rates increase and become closer to that 75, 78%. How did that continue to change things and evolve the support process?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, because I remember the first year, it was a bit difficult because we were really, really busy the first year. I've been working with clients specifically with TSM for about just over 3 years now. The first year, I think we had around about a 60% success rate. And then it started going up to 65, 70, 65, 68 the second year. And then I think we need to do them again more detailed, but we're around about the 70 to 75% now. And we're finding that each year that we go through, we're learning more and more and more about processes and what to do and how to do them. But everybody or lots of people do a program slightly different. Our program is I will take someone from the initial phone call right the way through a very, very detailed assessment that we do with them, right the way through to a minimum of 6 month program where I'm speaking to them 2 to 3 times a week for the first week to 2 weeks to 3 weeks, depending on the level that they're drinking at. And then once a week at least for the first 3 to 6 months, and then once a month, and then it changes with each individual. But what I've learned through the whole process is there are very, very clear patterns that are coming out as we go through. For example, I wish I had time today, but I don't. But I work from your drink diary, Jenny. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We use that. I only ask clients to do 3 things: 100% compliancy, fill out Jenny's Excel spreadsheet diary every week and email it to me, and stay in touch with me at least once a week, if not more, depending on how much someone's drinking and what they're going through. And by doing those 3 things, so when I do the assessment with people initially, I go through quite an intense assessment with them. So I'm looking at the past background. Have they relapsed in the past? Have they been on recovery programs in the past? Have they tried AA? Have they tried rehab? How long have they been drinking? But most importantly, what level are they drinking at before they start on the program? So we put that onto the drink diary, which you have your pre-TSM amount. They'll put in the pre-TSM amount. And because I'm working with people from the very beginning, I would say 90 to 95% of the clients that I work with, I will see a 30 to 50% drop in the first 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And that right across the board. And I'm now starting to realize that when people are taking the naltrexone, it's sitting on the receptor immediately. The medication goes to work immediately, and it's dropping the endorphin reward down to whatever level it drops it to. But the brain then naturally stops chasing the amount of volume that people are drinking. Now, it might bounce back up again a little bit, or even right the way back up again, but you always see that drop. So there's lots of little things like that that I've learned as you're going through the process. In the early days, I used to get clients on board, and if they didn't phone me, in the abstinent-based world, we were always taught that you have to you have to wait till people get to rock bottom, and then you have to wait for them to want to come to you to do all that kind of stuff. And I suddenly realized, I thought, hang on a minute, people weren't phoning me as often because either through embarrassment or just through worry or through anxiety or through something else. So I actually then made a decision that even though I've booked a weekly appointment with someone, I will make the point of phoning them, and I will contact, and I will be the first to phone them, because once you break that ice with the individual and they feel comfortable and they realize I'm not going to judge them, I'm not going to question how much they're drinking, all of a sudden you get someone, you're on the phone with someone every single day, and most importantly, you build the relationship with the person. And then that, you know yourself, Jenny, that everybody coming on to TSM is coming on from their different background, different amount of drinking. Have they withdrawn? Have they had seizures in the past? Have they had this? Have they done that? So a week-to-week support program I think is so vital, because we have to make sure that someone's reducing at the right speed. There's no risk of seizure. They're not suddenly stopping too much. And then in amongst all that reduction, I always say that there's 3 stages in TSM. The first one is that initial drop. The second one is then it will then level out. And then at that point, level out, we have to go into what I call habitual change, where that's emotional, psychological, and habitual changes. And then once we get down to extinction, we then need to say to people, okay, now extinction's a different thing as well. So that whole process, I've realized there's 3 very clear stages, and walking someone through stage 2 is very, very personal. On all there's a lot of Facebook pages, there's a lot of general information out there, which is amazing, which is really, really good. But there's also a lot of it is very good for what I call generic information. So you can go on there if someone's new and they say, well, take your pill 1 hour before you have your first drink, or all that kind of stuff. But if somebody is going through a divorce, if someone's going through something else, the hardest part of reduction in the Sinclair method is learning to cope with life without the alcohol. So I personally, as I'm talking to people each week, I'm making sure that as they're reducing, that they are coping emotionally and psychologically with that reduction. So there's a whole bunch of stuff, so we can then signpost them to professional help. But it just gives it for me, it gives it a much fuller process to go through. And it's not everyone doesn't need that process. Some people can take a pill and get support 2-3 times through the whole process, and they'll get there. It's whatever suits anyone.
The entire concept of rock bottom has never set well with me, but taking that even further to the concept that if someone is struggling with addiction, and you know they're struggling with addiction, and they don't reach out, like waiting for them to do something and to take that first step, it sounds contrary to everything that they say about mental health in general. They say, you see all of these public service messages that are suicide awareness and depression, and where they say your friend or loved one may not have the mental and emotional capacity to even reach out and ask for help. Don't wait for them. Be proactive, reach out to those people. The entire mental health community is encouraging people to do that. So it just seems absolutely backward and archaic to say that because someone is struggling with an addiction, that they have to also then be the one to say, hey, I need help, because sometimes they just don't. Just like depression, just like if they are dealing with suicidal thoughts, they may not have the ability or even know who they can reach out to. So I really feel that what you're doing there and making that decision is so critical, not only in building that trust because the trust will then help you to help guide them to making their own path and decisions. But it just seems so much more humane.
And that's what I love about TSM. It's in the abstinent-based world, there are some amazing people, absolutely amazing people that do an amazing job. However, the nature of it worked very, very well for a number of years. But obviously now that we know that science and medicine has moved on, and there is now the one thing that absolutely blew my mind when I first heard about TSM was that it was a neurological condition. There's too much endorphin being released in some people's brains. And after a number of years of having that reward, the brain becomes dependent. That's why it's alcohol use disorder. I mean, it becomes dependent on that reward. And when I understood that, the whole penny just dropped, and I suddenly, or the dollar or the cent, or whatever you want to call it, that it just suddenly realized, and I thought, hang on a minute, it's not that there's bad people or it's wrong, but I put a social media. I found a picture of a car that was built in 1935 the other day, and I stuck it on my social media. And I said, absolutely beautiful car in its day. It was the best, and it was the best thing around. It did an amazing thing in its day. But however, we don't drive cars today that were built in 1935 because engineering has moved on. The shape of the cars moved on, the designs moved on, all that kind of stuff, the mechanics and everything has all moved on. So the model that we use for recovery is the model that we used in the 1935 car. And whichever model it is, because it's all what I call a pyramid from AA from when it started, because it was all 12 steps. So even all the abstinent-based programs, the rehabs, they're all based around a 12-step program. So we're still using a model that was from 1935.
Right. And at the time, there literally was nothing else. And so it was groundbreaking at the time.
Yeah. And it still is. I mean, I've got to be very careful when I ever say this, because I worked in the program for a while, and there are people today who are alive because of it. And
absolutely.
It's
But I've also known that some of the best, most insightful conversations I've had over the years, especially when I go to addiction conferences, is when I stand there and talk with somebody who has 30 plus years of sobriety through AA, and they can see where, yes, having other options available are actually a really good thing because they've been in it long enough to see the people that it didn't work for. They've been in it long enough to attend the funerals and see the loss. And it's been really interesting to me because, like you, I've always thought that the support portion of what AA and other abstinence-based support groups do is like it is so critical, and it is what they do best. And like scientifically speaking, they've shown that when you feel support for something that you're doing, whether that's good or bad, you're going to be more likely to be successful at it. I mean, that's why peer pressure is so strong, because peer pressure is support to do the wrong thing.
To do the wrong thing? No, you're right.
Support.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when we talk about, let's go ahead and break down your 3 stages and talk about the differences in support during those 3 stages. So the first one is that initial drop. And as we all know, the initial drop is not the same for everybody, because you've got people who are coming into the Sinclair Method, some of whom have drank every single day for decades, some who binge every 2 or 3 months but are largely abstinent in between, but when they drink it is always problematic. And then thankfully we've got this new group of people in the last 5 or 6 years who are almost being just proactive. They're seeing that they're not comfortable with how much they're drinking. It has not yet become problematic or overly problematic, but they can see where it has the potential, and maybe they can see that genetically they've gotten their in their family history a history of addiction, and they can see where they're headed and they want to put the brakes on right away. So they're three very different drinking styles and drinking quantities and frequencies that are primarily coming to the Sinclair method. And obviously, all of them need a different type of support. So why don't you talk a little bit about that? I'm assuming you find a lot of that out in that comprehensive assessment that you do.
Absolutely. So one of the questions we ask them is drinking pattern. Tell me about your drinking pattern. So when I'm asking about the drinking pattern, I'm asking, are they drinking? Is it just night times? Is it afternoon, evening? Is it all day? Are they kind of drinking around the clock? What I'm trying to find out is, what is the pattern? Are they daily drinking? Is it just 3 or 4 days a week and they're having 2 or 3 days off? Are they binge drinking where they're drinking for 3 or 4 days? In Scotland, we have a lot of guys that work on oil rigs here. So they'll go off for a month. They'll come back for a month. And so they're having a big blowout for a month and then not drinking for a month. Or there are people that are binge drinkers. They're drinking solid for a week, nothing for 2 weeks, or whatever. There's lots of different patterns. So I think that a huge part of it is we first and foremost have to know what that pattern is. Specific, first and foremost, for the safety of the individual, for when they're on naltrexone, that we don't have them reducing too much so that they don't go into withdrawals, and there's a risk of seizure. So we're trying to find out all about that side of things, and then dependent on what their pattern is I would then tailor make a program for the client. Now, that doesn't mean I put together a package and sort of say, okay, this is what we're going to do. But I need to have an understanding of their drinking history. So how long have they been drinking at a heavier level? How long have they, are they drinking every day? What are they drinking? Do they have any history of seizures, any history of tremors? Are they sweating at nighttime? All that kind of stuff. So we're going into all of that. So once I've got that information, we get the medication to the client. Then what I do with them is say, so all I'm doing initially, all I want to do with the person is to get them through the half tablet. So we half tablet first day, half tablet the second day. I will be in touch with the client on day 1 and day 2, every client, just to make sure, are you okay? Any nausea, any lightheadedness, so I know exactly that, okay, we're okay. Okay. Then the doctor has said it's okay for you to go up to full tablet. So go up to full tablet. So, and then once they get up to full tablet, my advice at that stage is, don't do anything. Just take your pill 1 hour before you have your first drink and drink as you feel is right to drink. So I don't give them any information. I don't give them anything else except just drink as you feel is right to drink. So what I'm trying to do is I'm just making sure that the meds are working, and I'm looking to see what that initial drop is. It'll be whatever it is. So it might be, if someone's drinking 100 units, they might drop to 70 units straight away. But what I'm listening for initially is I'm listening for, I had a few drinks and I just didn't feel like having another one, or I didn't drink anywhere near as much as I used to. And that I just, yourself, there's lots of different things that they start to say. So for the first week, I'm just saying to them, just drink as normal, because what I'm trying to do is get what I would call a level. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking, this is your pre-TSM level. You will get an initial drop to whatever it is. And then I'm looking to see, I want a natural drop to that level.
Right. So a baseline.
Baseline. So, and then once we find out that baseline, now it'll take a week or two to find that. During that week or two, when I'm speaking to the client, I'm just saying to them, just keep drinking whatever you're drinking. Yep, everything's fine. Just drink whatever is right. And they'll start saying, well, I should be cutting back. And I said, don't worry about it. I said, just take your pill and drink. And what I'm doing at that stage is I'm spending most of that time explaining to them about TSM. This is how it works. This is what to expect. Week 3 and week 4, it is very, very common for me to get a phone call from the client to say, I need to increase my medication. It's not working anymore. Or it stopped working. It stopped working. And I said, no. I said, that's normal. I said, you will get this drop. Your brain will very, very quickly adjust to the new level, and you will forget where it was 2 weeks ago. And I said, but it's normal. You don't need to increase your medication. You just stay where you're at. And then from here on in, I heard something in the early days that there's two sides to AUD. One side is the craving, your body's physical requirement for alcohol. The other side is the habitual side. And then in Dr. Sinclair's book, not in the Cure for Alcoholism, in page 30 something, I think it is, it shows that the majority of the craving is dealt with after a week between 90 and 100 days. So then I suddenly realized, I thought, hang on a minute, if that's the case, then the majority of drinking after that stage is habitual, emotional, psychological. So therefore, people come to me. I was finding it really difficult to work out what is the difference between craving and what is the difference between habit. And so now I realize after week 7 or 8, it's not craving, it's habit. So once we've had that drop, we then start working on, okay, we then go into the drink diary that you made. Thank you very much. So we go into the drink diary, and I'll look at what I'm looking for is the pattern. So what are your patterns? And then we dive into the pattern for stage 2 and say, okay, what time do you have your first drink? Let's start changing that up a little bit. What are you drinking? If you're drinking, you'd call it hard liquor. We call it sort of spirits. If you're drinking hard liquor, are you okay to drink wine? Are you okay to drink beer, lager? Let's get off the hard liquor. So we take them through a very, very structured process. And then stage 2 is all about habit. It's all about.
Before we dive into stage 2, I got a couple questions about stage 1. First of all, how do you help support somebody who has a spouse or a parent or some other loved one that says, wait a minute, what do you mean? You've just been told to take the pill and continue drinking the way you feel normal for that first week.
Yeah.
So talk about the importance a little bit about having that outside support when your natural, normal support system is incredibly skeptical, saying, what a load of rubbish, as someone is trying to make this huge change in their life.
Yeah. So again, when I'm doing the assessment, I will always explain to them that part of the program that we offer is support for the family member, partner or parent or something else. And with that, as long as I get my client's permission, I will speak to husbands, wives, parents, and everything else. And I will do a Zoom meeting like this. And the one thing that I've learned from the abstinent-based programs to coming to TSM is if people haven't struggled with AUD, then it's not that they don't. Yeah, well, they don't understand it, but that AUD itself is a completely different area to what they understand. So what I learned, and again, sort of about year 2, excuse me, was that when I was sitting down with a family member, the most important thing, and I realized that the majority of people who were struggling with AUD and with the alcohol didn't even realize what was causing it. So if they didn't realize what was causing it, then the family members have got no idea. So the only thing I will do with a family member when I sit down with them, and I'll say, okay, we need to sit down for half an hour, 45 minutes. And if it's okay with you, I need to explain to you what causes addiction, what is going on, when someone drank when they were early. I'm quite a geek when it comes to, I was so fascinated with the neuroscience of it all that I went and studied a lot about the neuroscience. And when we drink alcohol, it releases 1,200 nanograms of endorphin. And when I went and looked at and studied all that, and I was fascinated with it. And then I realized that the reason that abstinence doesn't work is that when someone starts drinking early on in life and they get a 1,200 nanogram reward, then the brain just, if you put it under an MRI scan, which I've seen YouTube videos on, that it lights up like a Christmas tree. So if you do that for a number of years, if someone's 20, 30, 40, 50, if they're 50, and they've been drinking like that for years, the brain is so dependent on this reward. So when you take that away from the brain, all of a sudden the brain drops into the deprivation effect. It drops into craving mode, and it has to fight it. So I sit down with a family member and I'll say, listen, okay, what is causing this? They're not bad people. They haven't made bad decisions. They're not deliberately trying to ruin the family. The 1,200 nanogram reward that they're getting is the equivalent to heroin. So that's why if you take that away from someone, they will beg, borrow, steal, fight. They will hide, drink. They will do whatever they have to do, because the brain goes into survival mode. And it's like, I have to have this whatever happens. So they're not bad people. So I'm going over and over with partners and clients. It's not your fault. You are responsible for what you do under the influence, but the what is causing it is not your fault. So sorry, that was a long way to say what I'll do with a family member is I will explain to them what causes the addiction from a neurological process. And once they understand, so many people go, oh, wow, I never knew that. That's why they've struggled for so many years. That's why they've stopped and then couldn't stay stopped. And it's not because they're bad people. And I say, if we don't treat it with medicine, we've got a medication today that can treat. It's treatable. It is completely treatable. We will have to work on the habits and adjusting. And then I explain a little bit about TSM and how that works. And sometimes I have to be very, very careful with family members, because at that stage, because they haven't understood it for so long, it's created a lot of issues in the house a lot of the time. So sometimes they then start feeling a little bit guilty and saying, wow, hang on a minute, I never knew this. Why has no one ever told me this? So I don't know if that explains it, but once you explain what causes the addiction, and then it gets them on board. But then even as we're going through the program, if someone doesn't understand AUD and even with the day-to-day challenge of what someone's going through, even after 3 to 4 months, they can still say, well, why are they still drinking? We've dropped 60%, yes, but why are we still drinking? So at that stage, I'll then have to have another meeting and I'll say, listen, we've dropped 60%. They're sending me a diary every week. They're taking the medication all the time. And I always say to people, this abstinence apparently is an immediate fix for a long-term process. The success rate is lower. I always say to family members, and I said, TSM is a long-term fix, but it's a permanent fix. I said, so please, please, please bear with me. If they're taking the medication, sending me a diary, staying in touch with me, and we're seeing it dropping all the time, it's only a matter of time before they get it under control. I said, so please, please bear with us for another month or 2 months or 3 months, and it will change your lives.
So, by the way, the audience is loving the science talk. So great feedback on the science. So one last question for stage 1. Because it does occasionally happen. It's not necessarily the norm, but even Dr. Escapa mentioned this during the conference last year. Some people start the Sinclair Method and immediately go up temporarily instead of down. So have you seen that? Again, it's not as common. It's rather uncommon, but it does happen. Have you dealt with that? And how does that differ the support that you need to give in that first couple of weeks?
In the first couple of weeks it all depends on whether they're drinking from a dangerous level. I mean, if they're drinking sort of a bottle of hard liquor a day, then we've got to be very careful with any sort of increase, which is why I'm doing that initial assessment. So every client's different. But if it's safe for that to increase, we used to call it pre-rehab blowout is what it is. Every time someone goes into they go into an abstinent-based program or they go into rehab, every single time, 2 to 3 days a week before they went in, bang, they would just go crazy because they know they're going into rehab, and then that's going to be them for the rest of their life. So we're just going to have a good blowout before we go into thing. I called it a pre-rehab blowout. I find it happens as well. It's more with the slightly more chronic drinkers that I find it does happen. So I'm working with a client at the moment who's a chronic drinker, about a bottle of hard liquor a day. And he started taking the medication, and his drinking has gone up. But it's only gone up until the minute I saw it going up. It only normally lasts for 2 or 3 days. And the reason it happens for 2 or 3 days is that he hasn't fully got a grasp of how the Sinclair method works. And his previous experience of abstinence is that I'm going to be stopping drinking in a week's time, so I'm going to get as much down me as I can now, because the brain's going into survival mode. So I've said to him, listen, we're not going to drop you really quickly. We need to drop you a little bit because your drinking's not safe at the moment, but don't go and have a blowout. Don't. And he went, oh, right, okay. I thought I was going to have to stop next week. So it's more of it's a panic that they're going to stop, and the brain going back into an old habitual habit of what they've done in previous abstinent-based programs, where I'm stopping drinking now. I'm just going to have a quick bang before it happens. But I've never seen it last.
And talk about the difference that that you see in people when they have you there to support, and their process of going from that panic moment, because we see that a lot. And that's the panic is why a lot of people will give up, because like you said, they don't necessarily understand that this is not an overnight solution. It's not going to work in a week. You're not getting there immediately. And so they panic and they assume that it's never going to work. So why bother? So talk about how you can see their emotional journey of taking them from the panic to the reassurance that, no, this is part of the process.
Yeah, and you have to do that all the way through the program. It doesn't matter what level somebody gets to. After a month, they're phoning up and saying, well, because they'll have that initial drop in most cases, and then it levels out, and then they're not dropping as much. So then you've got to reassure them, okay, it's okay. Because at that point, oh, well, I'm going to give up. If I didn't phone people at that point, they would say, well, I've had this initial drop, but it's not working anymore, so I'm just going to pack it in. So it's a constant reassurance. It's a constant reassurance for the family, for the partner, especially husbands, wives. And for the individual, each stage that we're going through, a lot of the time, some weeks, I'm not going into huge, big explanations about this, that, and another and everything else, because once we've been on the program for 4, 5, 6 weeks, a couple of months. For example, I'll get someone who'll phone me up. They had a huge big argument with a partner last week. So on your drink diary, it will come up, say 10 units every day, boom, 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 boom. And then on the Wednesday, it goes up to 20 units, and then it goes back to 10, boom, 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 boom. So they phone me up and they're going, oh, I'm sorry, but I shouldn't have done it. And I had 20 units last Wednesday. And I says, right, okay. I said, first and foremost, I said, did you take your pill? And they said, yeah. And I said, right, okay. First a quick thing, I don't care. I genuinely don't care that you had the extra drink. And to most people, that's a shock. And it's like, oh, no, hang on a minute. Every other program I've been on, people have pushed me and said, why did you do that? Why did you do that? And I said, the only reason you've done that is because you've had an argument with a partner. You're in an emotional situation where you haven't learned how to cope with that yet, without the alcohol, or at the level of alcohol that you're at. So you've gone back up to the 20. Now, the most important part of that whole process is once they've been on the medication for 3, 4, 5 weeks, then we're starting to know that there's a big difference. Pre-TSM, people are drinking because the underlying drive for everything is craving, or addiction. So the reason people are drinking pre-TSM is all based around craving and addiction. Now, once we get that under control, the medication doesn't do it, but it does it through the pathways and everything. But once we get the craving under control, then any increase in the diary that I see, it doesn't just go nicely all the way down, it goes down and then up a bit and down a bit and up a bit. Any little peak that we have going up and down is what I call circumstantial drinking. That's only, it's peaked a little bit because you've had an argument, you've lost a loved one, you've had a bad day at work, you've had a good day at work, you had a wedding, you had something, Christmas, you've had Thanksgiving, you've had something. So it's peaked up a little bit. But because that peak up is not, as long as you've taken the medication, that little peak is because of circumstances and habit, not because of craving and addiction. Now, if it was because of craving and addiction, it's going to spiral out of control again, and you're going to be back to where you were. So that's my first question: is did you take your pill? Yep, not a problem. Because if you then watch it, especially after 4 or 5 weeks of the program, if someone has a little peak, you'll find very quickly it will drop back down again to where it was like Christmas. Every single client I worked with, they had a peak at Christmas. It went up for a week over Christmas. After Christmas, I said to people, drink what you want to drink over Christmas. Just whatever you do, take your pill. Now, straight after Christmas, it will drop back down to the pre-Christmas level because the neurological pathways have built structure. Oh, that's a different kettle of fish, that one. But it will drop down to where it was pre-Christmas. And every single client I've worked with, they've gone bump, bump, and come back down to where they were before Christmas.
Now, do
And
you also see, and I see this a lot of times in our peer support groups, so I'm wondering if you see it as well. So people will say, oh my gosh, my drinking went way up over Christmas, way up over the holidays, and I don't know what's going on and what's wrong with me. And then you stop and say, well, what were Christmases like before the Sinclair Method? And they're like, oh, well, they were so much worse. And it's like,
yeah,
do you hear that?
Yeah,
because that's success. That
yeah.
is improvement. And improvement is gradual, and improvement is not linear, unfortunately. We all wish it were immediate and in a straight line from start to success, but it really isn't. So we had a good comment here from Belenky Boy. It says, I went up immediately after a week as my brain fought to remember how I used to drink. But then as I consistently used naltrexone, my numbers went down. I was scared because I thought I detonated a bomb, but my addiction specialist reminded me that it takes a while to become a problem drinker, and it takes a while to unroot those patterns.
Yeah. And the number one thing that on an abstinent-based program, when you're getting a 1,200 nanogram reward and you take that away from it, the first thing that happens is you have to go either through a detox or you have to go through withdrawals, which is a horrible week to go through. It's a horrible week to go through. And then after that, all of a sudden you've had that 1,200 reward taken away. The body goes into craving. So you get the craving kicks in. So you've got the withdrawals, you've got the craving. You've also got, all of a sudden, I'm having to cope with everything in life now without my alcohol. So it's a whole stack of stuff going on, emotionally, psychologically. And each time someone has tried that in the past on abstinent-based programs, the brain subconsciously remembers it. So it's like, hang on a minute, the last time I tried this, it wasn't fun. Now, when you're coming onto the Sinclair Method, it doesn't matter how often someone is telling you, we're going to do this slowly, we're going to reduce down at a speed that is comfortable for you. It's going to be okay. You're not going to get the craving. You're not going to get the withdrawals. The reduction program, as long as we move it at a speed that is comfortable and safe emotionally and psychologically for you, then that process is going to be very, very comfortable. So therefore, you're not going to hit that stage. Now, it takes, again, this is where, once I've explained that, every week I'm saying to people, it's okay. It's okay. You're okay. We'll just keep going where we're at. We're going to reduce a little bit more next week, or we're not going to reduce more, but we're going to change the time you drink. We'll go from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock, or we'll change from hard liquor to lager or beer or something. So all those little changes, keep track on the diary, and then you'll notice the diary will start to drop, but the reduction is safe. So they're not going through that abstinent-based panic struggle. Everything was horrible. I mean, a detox or a withdrawals is not fun. It's not fun. So there is a panic. So absolutely, what that the lady or gentleman is saying, the brain goes into panic. So if you take away the 1,200 reward from someone, your brain is so dependent on that reward that the brain will drop into survival. They call it survival mode. It will do anything and everything to get that reward when it's craving it. Exactly the same when you go into the TSM, the brain instantly thinks, hang on a minute, I'm going to go into withdrawals. So it goes into panic and it goes, it goes into that gimme, 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 gimme mode, and it drinks a lot and drinks a lot, so it might go up. But then this is where, if you have a support structure and you've got someone who understands that process, you can say, right, stop, whoa, okay, relax. We're not going to take you down to nothing in the first week. So, and I always say to people that the beauty of the support side of it is that if someone's drinking 100 units and they drop to say 70 units, when I speak to them every week, the first thing I'm asking them is, how are you getting on? How are you coping with that emotionally, psychologically? Are you okay? And if the answer to that is yes, we make another habitual change to the next week, and then we go through that. And I only make little ones initially. So as we're going from week to week now, the minute someone turns around to me and says, that was too difficult, oh no, I really struggled, or if their circumstance in life suddenly changes, where the emotional upsetness, that's not a proper word, but the emotional thing has increased a little bit, what we then do is I will actually put a stop on that reduction as long as the level that they're drinking at is safe. So we'll stop at that level and say, listen, right now, you need to deal with the loss of a loved one. You need to deal with whatever has come along in life. Right now, just keep taking your pill. It will maintain where it is as long as that's a safe level for you to drink and no one's getting harmed or you're not getting harmed. Deal with the circumstance. Once that circumstance emotional side is starting to subside a bit, we can then move on with the program. It's a stunning program.
Well, and I would also think that that just trying to deal with the triggers and the habits alone without also having the medication to work on the physical side would just lead to what they call decision fatigue, because you're always having to just say no and constantly think about not drinking. And so you divert. I mean, we can only make so many decisions in a day. We can only, we only have a pretty set emotional bandwidth for what we as humans can deal with. And so having that, having the physical side at least eased, that would make it easier, wouldn't it, to be able to work on those habits and addressing triggers and coping.
I remember somebody saying that in rehab, we would have daily group work. Every single day, we would go into group work. Okay, what are your triggers? What are this? What are that? Blah, 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 blah. And then with some people, we would then talk about counseling and everything else. I heard a while ago, someone said to me that if your brain is craving that reward, now, if you put it into counseling, or if you go into counseling yourself, then when you go into counseling, your brain, all your brain is telling you is alcohol, alcohol, alcohol. So it's like when you go into counseling, all you're hearing is it's not really focusing. That the fascinating thing, if I can share it, that I've learned with, I'm talking from rehab, so but all the processes are roughly the same. That I was always taught in the work that I did that people drank because of a problem. That they're drinking because they've got there's a challenge that they're struggling with. And so then we would look at that in rehab and we would put people through counseling and everything else. The fascinating thing that I learned with TSM was that that people might start or increase their drinking because there was a life situation that happened at some stage in their life. So they increase the level of drinking. Now that means that the brain is getting more and more and more and more of the 1200 reward. Now, at some point, the brain will tip over into dependency. Now, the minute the brain tips into dependency or addiction, or it cannot do without that 1200 reward, the reason people will drink on a day-to-day basis or become dependent on alcohol is not because of the emotional circumstance. It's because the brain is addicted to alcohol.
Right. Our bodies crave a state of balance and homeostasis. And if that level of alcohol for survival and working day-to-day functioning gets disrupted, then it becomes very difficult. So, Bruce, it is absolutely astounding to me to see that we are 5 minutes to the hour. So, we've really only done a deep dive into the first stage of support. So you are more than welcome. We've got some open speaker slots coming up in the next few months. You're more than welcome to join us again to maybe spotlight the second and third stages of support so that we can get those in. But it's hard to believe that we are almost out of time.
They always fly past. I do a live sort of Facebook as well, and whenever you do the hour, the hour just seems to disappear completely.
Well, not always, but definitely today. Sometimes it's like, okay, oh wow, we've got another 25 minutes to fill. What are those questions? And but today, this has just been such a pleasure. Audience, you guys have been wonderful too. We are so glad that you've spent the last hour with us. Please go ahead and flood the chat area with gratitude for Bruce. Any last questions you might have? We have a question from a first timer about this being recorded. And yes, this is being recorded and it will be available. So, Bruce, any last words for our audience before we end?
I have never, never. I mean, I have never. I genuinely. I think that I've always said that if standing on your head, reciting the alphabet backwards works for you, then I will support it till I'm blue in the face. If I was in a situation where I was struggling with alcohol dependency now, and someone came up to me and said there was a program with a 78% success rate, I would jump at it. And the only thing I would say is that be 100% compliant with the medication. I know Jenny, C3, they've got apps, they've got Excel spreadsheets. Find some way that you can record it to check your patterns, and make very little change every week, and just keep adjusting, and get yourself a coach. Find someone who can talk you through it. And it works. I promise you it works. I work with client after client after client, and we see people just dropping. It takes a little bit longer for some people, it takes shorter for others, but it does work. And the only other thing I'd like to say as well is that thank you, Jenny and Claudia. The work that you guys have done is incredible. And we were just talking before we came on that Scotland TSM wouldn't be here if it wasn't for C3. And I could bring up people here whose lives have been saved, genuinely been saved, because of the work that you've done in the States. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Bruce. So for anyone who came in late, or if you want to share the stream or watch the stream again, we're going to have today's video up on our website, on YouTube, Vimeo, Anchor, and Spotify, hopefully all by the end of today. And then as soon as we're able to, we'll add the transcripts and closed captioning as well. Next week, we're going to be joined by Crystal Fideli from a new organization called A Way Is Made. Crystal's going to speak about her personal experiences and her struggles with accessing the Sinclair Method, how it's changed her life, and how she's using that experience to help other people. Hers is a very powerful story of perseverance and resilience, and you're really not going to want to miss this. Claudia is going to join me more as a co-host than a guest, but the three of us will be on at the same time next week. If you've found value in the broadcast, we hope you'll hit the donate button in our profile, or you can head to the website to make a donation at c3foundation.org/donate. You can follow our channel to get broadcast alerts. In fact, we're getting close to 400, so that's pretty exciting. You can also subscribe to our channel, and then you get to go ad-free, and you don't have to see those ads I run at the beginning and end of the show. If you're an Amazon Prime member, you can subscribe for free. So if you want to suggest a guest or a topic for a future broadcast, we still have a few more open slots, and there is a link that is dropping in the stream to our schedule, which is where the suggest a speaker or topic form is. If you're on the Sinclair Method and you're looking for more peer support, or you just want to join the C3 Foundation community, we've got you covered with groups on Facebook, Discord, and the Options Save Lives forum. You can find Bruce at Alcohol Recovery Scotland, and he's one of our coaches at yoursinclairmethod.com, so you can reach him there as well. And that's it for today. Everybody have a wonderful weekend. Be gentle with yourself and with others, and I will see you next week. Bye, everybody. You've been watching the Options Save Lives weekly live stream, hosted by Executive Director Jenny Williamson and produced by the C3 Foundation with the support of R Street Institute and other generous supporters. For more information about the C3 Foundation or the Sinclair Method, visit our website at c3foundation.org. If you have a question you want answered live on air, to make guest suggestions, or to support the show, let us know. You can reach us through our website, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or on Discord. Join us each week as we continue to discuss more ways to help you build a better relationship with alcohol, or to eliminate it completely. Because recovery from alcohol use disorder is not a one-size-fits-all process. Options are available, and options save lives.